media has like the opportunity to actually do good things, right?
Mhm.
So, if you're talking about Trajan, like approaching young people or being accessible, right, to younger people, then things like YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all of those social media platforms, the ones that are, up and coming, the metaverse, whatever not, that's going to be the way to get access to them. Um, and it's a matter of us figuring out, yeah, who those leaders will be, the next leaders or the up and coming leaders. Because just like there's antisocial behavior, like the graffiti tags and whatnot, there's also pro-social behavior. That's also a term, right? So it's figuring out what the antisocial behavior we want to avoid is and what the pro-social behavior we want to move toward is. And so, Antonio, I'm actually kind of curious, I don't know if you're comfortable in talking about it when it comes to your dad specifically. But, now that you're an older person, do you know what the antisocial things he was involved in, even before like leading up to, getting into prison? But was there anything that you noticed that was like antisocial versus, pro-social or good behavior when it came to, your dad and how it operated in your household?
Well, my dad is like one of like 14 kids, and so I kind of feel like my grandma was more like that like matriarch of the family, and she took on like a lot of people's kids. And so I kind of feel like my dad kind of felt like he didn't get that love and fulfillment that he wanted. And so he didn't have a good relationship with his father, and so he kind of looked outside of his family for that support, and he got into gangs. I mean, gangs were really big in the 80s. They're really prevalent, and so he started, gang banging and doing drugs. I mean, I only seen my father one time before he went to prison, and I was 5 years old. My dad had 7 kids before he was 25, and the only reason why he didn't have more is because he went to prison. You know what I mean? So it's just so strange to me because I can see the allure of gangs, and I can understand like why someone would definitely navigate that, especially with like the music and the fast money and that camaraderie, but also like just some of the things that are done in that those atmospheres, and how they go against like your morals, right? Like where you're taught as a kid that there's certain things you don't do, and like that kind of goes against everything that you were taught. It wasn't like my grandmother was like on drugs or anything either, so it just kind of really confused me. Like I just didn't see the connection of like why you would want to be a gang member when you have so many kids. You know what I'm saying? Like where for me as a father, and just recently like seeing my son being 2 years old. I have two stepkids, but it kind of hits differently when you like see your child go from like being like an infant to like a toddler, and that love and that connection you have. It should be different, and it should, like I said before, like a mental switch should happen in your mind that like now like my life isn't about me anymore. And so I kind of think like gang banging and selling drugs, that's the exact opposite approach that you think that someone who is a father would take. And so it always confused me. And so instead of like, when I became a father, me understanding my dad more, it led to more confusion because I just didn't understand like how could somebody have children and hold them in their arms and then just say, you know what? Mm, I'm good. I want to go to the streets instead. I want to go do hood rat shit. And it's like, I just don't know. I just don't know how someone could do that, because I would never jeopardize my freedom knowing that I have people depending on me. You know what I mean? That's just so crazy to me. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's just a little bit of insight.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely your experience. And I think, I don't know how people could, do that knowing that people are depending on me, right? That's the last thing that you said. I think in some contexts, the way that the logic gets twisted in a person's mind is, I have to do this because people are depending on me. You know what I mean? Like it just gets flipped. And it's to try to help people understand that you don't need to make that flip in logic. because it doesn't make sense, right? And there are other ways, there are other options. In the 80s, certainly, maybe the 90s too, we didn't have as much access to information as we do now. These days, there's little excuse to be doing antisocial things.
Oh, for
It still
sure.
happens, right? It still happens, but there's just so many opportunities to be a benefit to your community and have access to information that helps you better yourself. So why not gravitate towards that versus the antisocial stuff? So I think that's some of the stuff we ideally could be working on as a society, at the community level and the family level, but we're not there yet.
Do you think our community champions a lot more antisocial things than any other community? So like you see this like in London, you see this in America and Canada. You hear a lot of like, drill music, killing people. And I'm just thinking like, what if you took some of those same lyrics and just said like, replace like black man with like puppy? who would ever who would ever let that be acceptable? You know what I'm saying? Like
Mm,
shoot a puppy in the face when I see a puppy. You know what I'm saying? Unload the nine on a puppy. You know what I'm saying? Like go pop the trunk in and unloading a puppy. You know what I'm saying? You would
yeah.
never accept that. So like, why is that so acceptable for black men to say that? And I understand, people want to use these avenues to get revenue, to get like out of their current circumstances. But my question is like, why do corporate entities still sponsor this stuff? You know what I'm saying? Like maybe if you took some of the revenue away from that, maybe you wouldn't be so active. Like you wouldn't hear these things about like men like beating up on women, even if it was their culture. Like say like someone was from like Islam and they were making music about like how they have to demean women because they're lesser than you. That wouldn't be mainstream. So why is it that black men killing black men is mainstream, or the other unsavory things that happen in our community as far as like trying to get men out of their money and like robbing men or stripping or doing all these things? Like why are those things championed, but you don't hear like other perverse things championed? Like you would never hear anybody champion anybody seen about raping somebody. And I think these are actively negative things, but why are those not treated the same way? And like I said again, if the corporate entities, as far as like ad revenue, like sponsorships, if they didn't see that financial incentive, they wouldn't make music like that. Or if they did, there wouldn't be the money involved. You know what I'm saying? So you see like when like the baby, like in the Dave Chappelle special, he brought that up. The baby killed somebody in the Walmart on self-defense, and he can make a rap song about it over and over again, right? And that's acceptable. But he makes one joke about LGBTQ, and now he can't perform at Rolling Loud. He can't perform at all these big venues. And then guess what he does? He has to repent. He has to say, you know what, I made a mistake. But he never has to admit, never has to repent and say I made a mistake after he killed that man, and then joked about it all the time. You know what I'm saying? So it's just so strange to me, like why we don't remove the financial incentive when it comes to all of the negative like champion that happens in our community.